Alright, hello! I decided I'm just gonna record voiceover today because I got pretty mad at this game today just because of various AI issues, because it's usually what it will end up being. So if I just, look over like I usually do, pretty normal commanders, except at least one or two of them are probably gonna have combat readiness instead of some other skill. I think it was actually one of my bottom ones. Yeah, it was him, or he actually had combat readiness instead of Flux. I think Flux works a little bit better, even for Conquest, but And then I just got the 2 Eagles to round it out to 8 officers, because if I had 8 Conquests, I couldn't have like a lot of support ships, and I think the whole point of going wide is just to have a lot of support ships. I feel like that makes a pretty big difference. So it's just 6 Conquest, and then I downgraded 2 of them the Eagles just to squeeze in more monitors, even though they weren't originally monitors. And they're just annoyance monitors of 2 tac lasers, and then resistant flux to help prevent arcing from killing them, and then, hardened shields, make the shields, even shieldier. And then flux and stabilized shields, although I might change my mind about flux and build in like hardened subsystems yet, but I decided that I was done testing stuff for the day because I was getting very mad, like I said. So I'm just gonna deploy everything and make them fight the entire same fleet, because I believe they should win. And if they don't win, it's like, oh, whatever. Whatever embarrassment happens in terms of ships dying for no reason, we'll just accept it. So I'll still be trying to, see good parts of the battle with my usually okay camera work, but probably not going to be as good because I'll be trying to ramble the whole time. So the main reason I got angry was I originally started out using vigilances. And I think the first minor issue I ran into is they ended up using 3 deploy points instead of 2 when you would put 5D mods on them and them not having an officer, which was like a small issue, but I figured it's like, oh, well, it really felt like it should be 2 because there normally were 5, and I believe it apparently doesn't round down deployment points. I think you have to go through a whole number of deployment points before it rounds down, because these monitors actually use 3, so ironically, if you're optimizing vigilances or modders for the lowest deploy point possible, they both end up at 3. Although I think 6 D-mods is possible, but the little mod I use to put D-mods on does not let you put on 6, even though I'm pretty sure you can get 6, and maybe even more in vanilla. It's just very unlikely the ship's even recoverable with a story point, I believe is how that mechanic works. Oh, they're pulling that Poron slot over there, which is quite nice. So that was what I started off with, is vigilances, and they were doing okay, but there was just a lot of needless death for the vigilances in particular, mainly because I just wanted them to exist entirely to use their Pylium and nothing else. And I even got to the point where I would only put a flat gun on them, but it's like their AI is more determined on their engagement range by the maximum range of a kinetic weapon that they have. So I could have I should have tried putting them without anything at all except for that missile, and then maybe they would have actually been very scared, rather than putting even a point defense weapon in there. But it still was not... They were not just, hanging out behind, a main front line of stuff, which is what I generally would want them to do. So it technically worked, but I just wasn't happy with it. It was just really annoying me, because I'm like, man, this AI just does not want to do what I want it to do. And I guess it makes me also think, is I know there is a mod that allows you to add, blank hull mods to your ship, and what those do is they change the behavior of the AI to more what an officer would do if it was commanded by officer, but you don't need to put an officer in charge of them to get the slightly different combat behaviors. But I figured it's I just didn't want to bother. I was more interested in testing. It's okay, well, how can I get a mid-tech support ship for just the main core fleet, because the main core fleet does very well, just to help them out a little bit. So I decided to try out using Griffins again, even though I had my issues with them before. And ultimately, I tried a few different loadouts. It's the same situation where, despite the fact they have extremely long-range weaponry, they want to get really, really close to the front. I think I even made them carriers where I like put the improvised carrier bay and they only had point defense and then their missiles that are very long range. And still, they just want to like get very close all the time. And eventually, what it means is that when like an Eagle or a Conquest has to retreat, it has its ability of maneuvering jets, which gives it that little bit extra movement speed. So what ends up happening eventually, especially against things like a Paragon, is a Griffin will be left in the front and it keeps trying to retreat, and then it just can't retreat behind its allies fast enough, and it's very likely it will die to burst damage if there's enough burst damage there. But I'm pretty sure, at least in that scenario, if you just put an avoid order on anything scary like a Paragon, you probably won't have an issue, because it will be at least far enough away from the Paragon to not die to its, like, honestly, just attack on lances. That's the only weapon that's likely to actually cause a severe amount of crippling damage to even a Griffin. So that was, like, you know, started making me quite irritated. So then I'm like, oh, I know ships that like work well. LL Monitor, that's like a good ship that works well, and I'd say most of the time, absolutely monitors work well. And then, of course, as I mentioned, if one gets disabled, I'm not exactly sure where it would have been. My guess is maybe it was fighting the Paragon by itself, because I don't have intel range on the Paragon, except I do now. It's very far north. I'm guessing he was really far north. And ended up dying. Which I think is actually, like, honestly fine, because we're using modders of 5D mods on them, so I expect that it's... If you're fighting, like, something like the whole Sem fleet, which I think is actually easier than fighting a pair of Ordos in, like, a lot of circumstances. But it's just a lot easier for me to, like, test generally how stuff are doing. But I'll totally eventually... Because I keep, like, all the old fleets I made, I'll like, figure out where, in this save, where, you know, a high-risk area is, and then just throw some of the better doing fleets against Ordos, and just see how well they do, because I believe it's actually harder than doing this, because this just has, like, a lot of slow, generally not threatening ships that are relatively easy to whittle down. I think it says a lot, because the ship that will usually be able to kill things here and there is that Paragon. And I think it's mostly just because of the Tachyon lances, so... I just find it a little bit weird, versus something like a, you know, Radiant with systems expertise, which will absolutely roll through, like, any weak point in your formation if your other ships don't, like, end up automatically putting themselves in a pretty good formation. Right now, though, because I did test this earlier, this is actually a way more reasonable formation than what was before, even though I don't think this is good, because we have the Conquest getting a little bit too busy cleaning stuff up. It's like this kind of happens every now and then, where they kind of end up stacked up like this against, like, a very weak force, and they don't redeploy to an area with, like, a way higher concentration. But that's just something you can do with orders, so... But I just want to test stuff without using any orders at all, so I can see just how well the ships are going to behave automatically. Because and I guess the main theory behind doing that is that eventually, if you do decide to, like, use orders in campaign, because when I play through, I'll end up using at least a handful of orders, they should definitely be helping your formation instead of it being a crutch for the ship itself not being the best ship in general. Because I want to use orders to, like, smooth out the formation rather than, like, targeting a specific ship and having, like, a group of 5 fast attack ships just, like, you know, I just order them all to attack something and it gets rid of it. It's like, I want those fast attack ships to be able to do stuff on their own, and then if I really feel like, oh, I'm fighting 2 Ordos and I don't want to disengage, I want to, like, try and fight it, then I'll, like, be more sweaty with orders then. We did lose another monitor. I'm not sure where that one would have been. I assume near the Paragon, but it also, every now and then, especially gets a large number of ships, a modder won't have his shields up. And that this means that it's like Merv missiles will like sneak through. I've at least watched it a few times where a modder wouldn't have his shields up even if he's on like no flux. Oh yeah, see, we lost another one. I believe that one was definitely the Paragon, because I remember that being around here-ish. Yeah, so we lost like 3 modders this fight, which just feels weird. Feels like that shouldn't happen. Especially when these conquests are gonna come in and just delete, you know, what remains of the fleet. So it is just a little bit weird, and these modders aren't fully optimized, and they're being stacked with demons, so you can squeeze more into like a fight. Which seems like modders don't really scale with numbers very well. It seems like it just causes a lot of more issues than it's usually worth for your own major capital ships. I wonder if this conquest will manage to lose this fight, which would be kind of amusing. Because Auroras are actually good ships, and even though his shield efficiency would be like almost twice as good as this conquest, I think he'll at least get him, because his shield efficiency won out, but I think he's also out of squall as well. Are you gonna get help anytime soon? Relatively soon. But yeah, I guess one of the contributing things is just bizarre formations. But this automatic just letting ships do what they want. This ended up making a lot more sense for formations, even though it has like the general problems that I'm really used to. It's quite interesting. I think that's about like the most of the stuff I wanted to rant about, which is pretty good timing because this fight's about to end. Other than, I guess, like, oh, there was one weird thing, the monitors. I started out using the monitors with just a light mortar and the dual autocannon, because it seems like a pretty good weapon combo. It will, like, deal with shields when it gets close, and then it has a mortar to, like, do something to a hull if it comes up, and then it doesn't use a lot of flux, so it should be able to still be a very tanky ship, even if it's just gonna, like, overly use its weapons. Really bizarre thing that kept happening is they got very scared of frigates. So what was happening in, like, this corner of the map is there'd be, like, all the enemy frigates, and then 10 of my modders would end up going down here, and they would just both be dancing around each other, with neither side pushing in and shooting its weapons, and it was stalemated for, like, at least 5 minutes. Before eventually something must have happened with like a capital ship pushing in. And that caused things to actually engage. That was really bizarre. Because I've never seen that happen before. But, and they also just weren't very good at killing stuff, so I just switched them to attack laser. That seemed to fix it for some reason, probably just because of range. But yeah, but these ships did very, very well this time. I guess this will just be the current broad fleet I settle with for now. So, thank you all for watching and listening to me ranting, just because I really felt like just rambling on for a good 10 minutes or so due to being very angry, and angry enough to where I really did want to add subtitles, because it's honestly a little bit annoying to do. So, I might end up recording more ranty videos instead of videos where I'll just make a few subtitles over intermittently. But like I said, thank you.